to Cilvegozu now on the border with Syria, on the Turkish side of the border, because my colleague Obeyda Hito is there. Obeyda, over the past few months, you have almost lived in Idlib. You've been there so often. I just wanted to get to the bottom of what you think about the statements from Vladimir Putin and Hassan Rouhani, who are continuing to talk about the fact that there are many terrorists in Idlib. Do you see that as an excuse given by especially Russia, which is the biggest backer militarily, at least, of Bashar al-Assad's regime, as an excuse to hit civilians or rebel forces who cannot be considered terrorists but are still against the regime?
It's clear from what we heard from the three leaders today in Ankara that there is no agreement still on how to deal with the multitude of different armed groups that are in Idlib province. Over the last 5 months, there has been an aerial bombardment campaign, rocket shelling, artillery shelling, mortar fire on civilian infrastructure in Idlib province and in northern Hama, and most of the targets that were attacked by these different kinds of weapons were civilian infrastructure. The fighters, the opposition fighters, have formed their kind of like a joint operations room, if you will. However, what Russia and Iran and the Assad regime insist is that these groups are working with Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which is formerly Jabhat al-Nusra, which used to be a group that is affiliated with Al-Qaeda and was the dominant force in this region. And now HTS, they announced that they had separated from Al-Qaeda, but that stigma continued to stick with them. Russia and the regime and Iran with them continue to insist that these groups are allied with Al-Qaeda, that they're legitimate targets, and this is a pretext that they are using to carry out the attacks in Idlib province. But what we've seen on the ground over the last several months, that the vast majority of these attacks are hitting critical civilian infrastructure, including hospitals and schools, even water sanitation plants, water pumping stations, agricultural land. And these are attacks that have been documented by activists and are now being investigated by the UN. So this pretext of fighting terrorism, it seems like it's going to be something that Russia and Iran are going to use so that they can continue their operations in the region. Just today, as the delegations were arriving in Ankara, there were continued artillery and rocket fire in southern Idlib, and this is something that hasn't stopped even since a ceasefire was announced on August 31st, just at the beginning of September. So the situation on the ground, it remains violent. The violence hasn't completely stopped. It has diminished to some extent. There is a significant absence of aerial bombardment in the region in northwest Syria. There have been airstrikes, though, since the ceasefire was announced, but we did not hear today from any of the leaders any real steps that are going to be taken to stop all of these acts of violence. And this is what most of the people here in Idlib province were hoping for. People that we spoke to today inside of Idlib were really hopeful that they would get an announcement of some kind of safe zone, possibly in northern Idlib, but we didn't get any details about that from the world leaders. They were committed to the Sochi agreement, which requires the guarantors to put pressure on all of the parties to stop violent acts. But this is proving to be quite difficult because of the complicated situation on the ground in Idlib province.
Obeyda, thank you so much indeed. My colleague Obeyda Hito on the Turkish side of the border with Syria.